Hello and welcome to WIF at Sundance, a special edition of our Laptop Cinema Club series. We are so excited to bring you intimate discussions with women behind some of the most compelling work featured at the 2022 Sundance Film Festival. Today, I'm honored to bring you a conversation with Paula Eiselt and Tonya Lewis-Lee, directors of the new documentary Aftershock, screening as part of the US documentary competition at this year's festival. Aftershock is an absolutely harrowing and galvanizing examination of the US maternal mortality crisis through the lens of one family's tragic loss and fight for justice. Joining Paula and Tonya to discuss their film and the issues this film forces us to confront is Stacey D, Stewart, President and CEO of the March of Dimes, an organization devoted to ensuring the health of all pregnant people and babies. And now, Stacey, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ebony. And thank you for that intro. It's so great to be in this conversation today. I'm so looking forward to it. And again, my name is Stacey Stewart. I'm President and CEO of the March of Dimes. The March of Dimes is the leading organization fighting for the health of all moms and babies. As an organization, we are committed to a few key priorities. One is ending preventable maternal mortality and morbidity, ending preventable premature birth and infant mortality, and closing the equity gap between women and babies of color and all others. And so it's really my honor and my pleasure to be here with the co-directors of Aftershock, who have produced such an amazing, amazing documentary that we'll have an opportunity to really discuss more thoroughly. Before we get into it, though, I want to thank, in particular, Women in Film, as well as Reframe, an organization that's helping uplift the work of women directors and gender balanced productions. And of course, I certainly want to thank our two guests today, Tonya Lewis-Lee, and Paula Eiselt, both of whom are the co-directors of Aftershock. Just a special shout out to Tonya, who is also on the National Board of Trustees for the March of Dimes. We're always so fortunate to have her leadership, and Paula, the partnership between you and Tonya it simply is amazing. And we see that in Aftershock and the work that you all have done. This documentary, which is playing in the US documentary competition section at this year's Sundance Film Festival, as Ebony mentioned, shows really multiple families' tragic losses in the fight for justice, as it also sort of re-examines one of the most pressing and shameful national crises occurring right here in the United States of America, really shockingly, and the growing movement that surrounds it. This crisis around maternal and infant health, especially around maternal mortality and morbidity, women that die as a result of pregnancy and childbirth complications or come close to death. Over the past 30 years, and this is really the shocking thing about this crisis that a lot of people are not aware of. In the United States, over the past 30 years, pregnancy-related death has more than doubled. And in fact, I'll add to that to say that of all the highly industrialized countries in the world, the United States is the only highly developed country that has increasing rates of maternal mortality as compared to other highly industrialized countries whose rates of maternal mortality over this past decade or two have been declining. We know that Black women are 3 times more likely as compared to white women to die as a result of pregnancy and childbirth related causes. In some areas of the country, that ratio is even greater. We also know that nearly 15% of women in this country receive inadequate prenatal care, which is certainly leading to complications, both birth complications and maternal health complications. And this, of course, happens more often with Black and Indigenous women as compared to white women. We have significant issues around maternal and infant health that should not exist in this wealthiest country in the world. And we certainly have issues with respect to women of color, especially Black and Indigenous women, that should not exist in this country as well. And so I am so grateful to everyone who's been involved in creating Aftershock, especially Tonya, Paula, as well as Women in Film and Reframe, because what you're doing is bringing all of this crisis to life. You're bringing all of these numbers to life and making us understand and wake up to the maternal mortality crisis that exists. I hope after everyone sees Aftershock, we will no longer sit back and not want to take action to address the health and the lives of so many moms and babies in this country, and that we'll all be motivated to take action to correct this really egregious crisis that's happening in this country. So for that conversation, I'm going to turn it over to Tonya and Paula. I'd like to ask each one of you to just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you and your background. And Tonya, we'll start with you.
Great. I am Tonya Lewis-Lee. My background really is I'm a lawyer by trade. I actually thought I'd be a civil rights lawyer when I first started out in law school. I worked for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. I worked for Human Rights Watch. Really cared deeply about social justice issues, but ended up being a corporate lawyer. And then worked my way thinking about being a creative person, and began writing children's books. That's sort of my foray into a creative life. And from those children's books, Please Baby Please, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services reached out to me and asked me to be the spokesperson for an infant mortality awareness raising campaign. That was way back in 2007. Back then, I did not know that the United States had an issue with infant mortality. I didn't know that Black babies died at 3 to 4 times the rate of white babies in this country. And I had the opportunity to travel around the United States, learning and speaking about infant health. And ultimately what you discover when you're talking about an infant's health, you're really talking about a woman's health. And found myself, in a place where I became what I feel like is a lifelong advocate for women's health, because what I discovered was that Black women were not doing so well in this country. When it comes to our health, unfortunately, we have over-indexed in so many diseases. And I was really curious as to, first of all, why that is. Often the narrative is that Black women just don't take care of themselves, they're lazy, they don't eat well, they don't exercise, it's all their fault. And what I have discovered over the years is that narrative is not really representative of the situation out there. And so leading up to making Aftershock with Paula, I have done more production work since I've written my children's books. I think producing and ultimately directing is where I always wanted to be. But Aftershock, working with Paula, really gave me the opportunity, as you said, Stacey, to put the human face really on the issue of maternal mortality in this country. It's a little different than in a newspaper article, when you can really show who people are and how they live their lives and what the impact is when someone unfortunately does pass away from maternal mortality. So that's me.
That's great. Thank you for that. And Paula, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background as well.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Paula Eiselt. I am a filmmaker, and I've been wanting to make movies since I'm a teenager. Dreamed about going to film school. I went to an Orthodox Jewish high school. There was no film there. There was nothing. And really had to make my own path to start becoming a filmmaker and make my own film. So I did go into NYU Film School, and then quickly from there, just started getting into production and working on other people's films. And a few years ago, I had my directorial debut called 93 Queen, about a group of Hasidic women working for their own health care justice in their community, and was really, really fortunate and thrilled with how that was received. It was a co-production with PBS. It's now on HBO Max. And I think, I've always been drawn to stories about women's empowerment and everyday heroes trying to make change in whatever way they can. And I'm a filmmaker who makes character-driven films, verite films. People are stories, and I'm always looking for those characters, those people to drive any story forward. And I'm also a mom of 4, so maternal health is really, really personal to me. And I had my own very adverse experiences in the maternal health system, birthing these children. And so I know we'll get into how we got to Aftershock, but just mothers, women, justice is something that's in my blood, that I'm constantly drawn to, and just really, really grateful for the opportunity to tell these stories.
Well, that's amazing. I'd love to hear more about your personal stories. That's really incredible. I think though what I really, I mean, both of you shared a little bit about sort of your understanding of the maternal health crisis and kind of what motivated you. But I'd like to hear a little bit more about how did you all end up coming together to focus on Aftershock, and how did you all decide how to tell the story of this crisis? And Paula, why don't I start with you, and Tonya, please chime in.
Yeah, so as I was saying, I'm a mom of 4, and I had awful experiences in the maternal health system, not being seen and heard, and suffered in various ways, including the loss of a second trimester pregnancy. And so I knew that the system was broken in that way from my perspective, but it wasn't until 2017 when ProPublica started to release articles about lost mothers and the US maternal health crisis that I really understood we were in crisis. I read about Shalon Irving, and I remember it till this day, being in my bed till 3 o'clock in the morning, reading that article and just weeping, and the line that her mother says that, her funeral had so many doctors there, like, because she was a CDC epidemiologist, and that the injustice of that was something that just struck me to the core and really made me understand that what I experienced on an individual level was endemic to Black women, and that we are in crisis. So I really felt called to do my part and uplift these stories, and using my skill set to do that. And really from the start wanted to find the right partner, grounded in the community, grounded in the work, to join forces with. So I became a fellow at Concordia Studios. I pitched the project that this is what I want to do next, and secured development funding and resources to do that. And very early on, as I was, filming, I was filming a women's conference, and actually quite literally bumped into Tonya, and I had, known about her work and was just so excited that she was there. And then I'll let her take it away of what happened next.
Yeah, so I guess for me, as I mentioned, I had been, traveling the country, talking to women. One of the things I love doing is talking to groups of Black women about our health and how we access the best health we can. It's a journey. It's not always easy. It's not easy for anybody. And often in those audiences, someone would tell me a story about a friend, a sister, a cousin, who passed away from childbirth complications. And coming off of having just made a film called Crisis in the Crib about infant mortality in the United States, I was really thinking about, how do I tell a story about the US maternal mortality crisis? How do I tell the story about what's happening that all of these women are telling me about? And I knew myself as well that I needed a partner. It's a big subject matter. And like Paula, I wanted it to be character driven. I did not want it to be a survey film where you have people just talking at you about the issue. I wanted to humanize the issue. I wanted to show how, who women are. And it was really great to meet Paula and to see her film 93 Queen and to see the type of work that she does. It was wonderful that she had Concordia as a start. We met, as she said, and we got off to the races, and we just started working pretty much as soon as we met. Not sure how we were going to do it, but I think we were both very committed to the issue and to telling the story in a similar way, and we found a way to do that.
Yeah, sounds like it was a perfect match.
Yeah, it was one of those meetings where it's like, oh my God, like we want to do the same exact thing. Oh, you also want to do it that way? Yeah. Oh, great. Like that. It doesn't happen usually like that. So I felt really
that's amazing. So Tonya, just to pick up on that, I'd like to really find out from you, there's so many things to say about this maternal health crisis. Paula, it was really amazing that you even raised the woman from the CDC who died as a result of pregnancy and childbirth. And the CDC itself says 60% of all the cases of maternal death could actually be avoided if women got diagnosed in time, if they were treated in time, if they were listened to, respected, and heard. So Tonya, if you could start off with just, and then Paula chime in too, what's the most important thing, or what are some of the most important things you really wanted to inform people about with respect to the maternal health crisis? Why we have this problem, what it takes to get us out of this issue. What are some of the things that you really wanted the audience to really understand about this crisis and some of the solutions around it?
Well, first and foremost, I wanted people to understand that when Black women say they feel a certain way, they know what they're talking about. That Black women know their bodies best and that they need to be seen and heard. I think one of the things that I've come across, that we've come across, is that often in these situations, women say there's something not quite right, and they are not taken seriously. They're told, oh, just lie down, just rest, don't worry about it. So that was first and foremost in my mind. I also, there were things that I didn't fully know going into the film, to be honest. And so I really had to take a journey myself, and understanding that C-sections are major surgery, and that with the rise in C-sections, you see a rise in maternal mortality and maternal morbidity. I would say that the thing that I was really surprised about, I did not know, and I wish I had back when I had my children, I was not aware of midwives in the way that they exist and how they can be really helpful. And so one of the big things is that I feel like in the United States, we need to have integrated midwifery care for all women. So for me, those were the things that really stuck out to me. I know Paula has some for her as well.
Yeah, I'll just, start by just echoing that, midwifery care, we're the only Western country that does not have an integrated maternal health system. We don't have we don't have birthing options. The vast majority, I think it's like 95% of women give birth in hospitals. Nobody knows about birthing centers. Home birth is completely stigmatized. It's like you're crazy if you would do that. We know that is not necessarily true. And in other countries, all of that is supported by their infrastructure, and we don't have that. And I think what, something that stuck out to me is, about being seen and heard, and then reflecting on it with my own personal experiences, is that, being seen and heard is not a luxury. It's not like an extra icing on the cake. Like, you shouldn't have to, say that because you made it through a birth experience alive and your baby's alive, that's enough. That's like the lowest possible bar, is being alive. It should be a dignified experience. And I think not being seen and heard, and especially for Black women and other marginalized women, like that has a ripple effect with how you see yourself as a mother, as a person. You lose confidence when you're told that what you feel is not true. So just really understanding that being seen and heard is the foundation of good outcomes was something that I really took to heart.
The only thing I'll add to that, Stacey, just quickly, is that also that birth should not be a moment of fear. It should be a moment of joy. Women should not be birthing thinking that, oh my God, I'm afraid, I've got to do. They should be in a space where they can feel empowered, they can feel supported, and have a beautiful experience. I think that's really key. And unfortunately, in this country, birth, when you talk about birth, it's always prefaced with, oh, the pain, oh, it's going to be horrible, oh, this and that. And it really doesn't have to be that way.
Right. I loved how you all brought out the experience of the woman at the birthing center, contrasted with how a lot of women experience birth, and the listening and the respect and the care and the nurturing that was going on as she was giving birth was just beautiful. And it's what I think every woman aspires her pregnancy or childbirth to look like and feel like, with respectful care and nurturing care. And I thought that was beautiful. I think the other thing you all brought up, which is very interesting, and I think it's lost in this conversation around maternal health, is the impact it has on the partners, the husbands, the families, the other siblings, the baby who comes home, but the mom does not come home. The heartbreak of that. But you highlighted some of the key fathers Omari and Bruce and Charles, and I could go on with the names of those that you highlighted, but tell us a little bit about what that decision was like to really tell the story really of maternal health in many ways through the lens of these dads who are trying to continue on with the lives of their families without their partner and the heartbreak of that, but also how they turn that heartbreak into action. I think it's amazing. Tonya, do you want to start?
Yeah, well, again, often the narrative around Black women and Black women giving birth, it seems like she's out there on her own, she's a single mom, if something happens to her, it's, again, sort of she's out there alone by herself, her fault. And I think for us, number one, getting pregnant takes two people. And Black men are fathers and they care about their families and they are there. And when a maternal death happens, doesn't just happen to the woman. It happens to the entire family. It happens to her entire community. There's a hole that is really left. And so, we met Omari and Bruce very early in their grieving process, and they were so vulnerable and open to allowing us in because they really wanted these stories to be told. And it really struck us that and it's just amazing to see how they find each other, right? Mm-hmm. As you see in the film, Omari talks about how Charles reached out to him. We met Bruce, when Omari reached out to Bruce. And then you see in the film, Omari reaches out to another father. They have a real support group there. They allow themselves to be vulnerable with each other and hold each other up. And it really is such a beautiful thing. And I think that's something that's often forgotten, that these children are left behind and that these fathers have to raise their children by themselves.
I think it's really incredible. And I guess the one thing that I think people need to really understand is that, this is a heartbreaking situation, but it's not new. I mean, this crisis has actually been going on for generations. And it's kind of interesting that at this moment, we really are beginning to get a groundswell of interest and attention. I hope this film will continue to drive that and to fuel that kind of attention and advocacy. Paula, what are some of the things that you would hope after people see this film? What are some of the things that you hope people would want to get involved in or take action on, or just in the realm of public discourse? Like, what are some of in your ideal world, what would be some of the great results from this film and from more people seeing it and talking about it?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, talking about it is the goal. My wildest dreams, I would love for there to be a cultural shift around birth and birthing in this country, and how we can do better in that way. And the film offers a glimpse of what, especially through Felicia's birth, of what an empowered birth could be if you so choose that type of birth. But the point is that she chose that's what she wanted. So I would hope that we can work as individuals, as communities, to demand more birthing options, have more birthing centers available. This is, full spectrum reproductive rights is having choices of where you can birth. That's part of the conversation. So I hope that birthing people can demand that of their government to give it to them, because it starts with the people. So I would really hope that. And on a very tangible level, I hope that viewers can support the families that we're showing in the film. Shamony and Omari have the Aria Foundation, and they do a lot of amazing work for maternal health in memory of Shamony. Bruce is doing an amazing job with Save a Rose Foundation in honor of Amber, and they're raising money for a birthing center in the Bronx. So there's like so much tangible things people can do. You can donate. You can also, and I'll, my last thing is the Momnibus, which I know, Stacey, all about. Momnibus, tell everyone more than I can, but, to just, call your senators, call your Congress people, like really amplify Momnibus. So I think there's just like a ton to do, and we'll have it on our website soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Tonya, what in your ideal world, what do you want to see happen as a result of this film?
I will say, Helena Grant says it in the film, women have to take the power back. We have to, as Paula said, take that power back. And we're seeing it happen. I mean, that's the wonderful thing. Like we are in the midst of that's what's happening. As you said, Stacey, people have been talking about this issue for generations. This isn't new. It's been in our community. In the Black community, we've been talking to each other about it. And now it's reaching further out, and now legislation is happening. I, like Paula, would like to see, I would love a society where, first of all, there's integrated midwifery care in our practice. I mean, for my daughter, who's 27 years old, when she has a child, so excited about that grandchild later down the line. But when that happens, I hope for her that it's not so crazy to have a midwife and a doctor on the side and a doula. I would love for her to be able to tour a couple of birthing centers to see what's available to her, to consider a home birth if that's what she wants, to look at a hospital and look at the hospital and see if that's where she wants to go. I want for women to have the opportunity to have the choice of having the type of birth that works for them. The one thing that I want to be clear, Paula and I are not saying that women should have birth with a midwife at home. That's not what this is. What we're saying is every woman should have the choice to have the type of birth that she wants to have. But if she does want to have that birth in a hospital, she should be able to have the support around her that allows her the sense of safety and comfort to bring that child into the world in a way that's dignified and safe for her.
You know, Tonya, I know we just have a few more minutes, but the film also, I think, did a really nice job of looking at the historical foundation of some of these things. Looking back at the father of modern gynecology, J. Marion Sims, who actually, without anesthesia, operated on slaves as a way of perfecting the craft of gynecology, without any regard to the pain those women experienced, not even recognizing the humanness of those women. And speak a little bit, if you can, about the historical basis of where we've been as a country as an explanation of how we've gotten to this place where we're at right now.
Yeah, it's so interesting because what happens is when you think about racism, you realize that racism just doesn't affect Black people, it affects everyone. And when we're talking about birthing outcomes, I just want to be clear, in the United States, we talk about the fact that Black women are dying at 3 times the rate of white women, but white women are not doing as well as their counterparts in European countries either. So I say that because when you look back historically at the fact that there were midwives who worked on plantations that were paid by their slave owners to bring forth not just the workforce of enslaved people, but also care for their families as well. But when modern medicine comes in and the push is to get everyone to go into hospitals, there's a campaign that becomes waged against midwives. And it's so fascinating because it's exactly, I often say, what we're seeing with January 6th here in this country. What you saw isn't what really happened. And we're going to tell you it's something else, right? So all along, midwives have been really great and wonderful, and they were good until we want everyone to go into hospitals and we want everyone to pay the white doctors who work in those hospitals. And that campaign said that midwives are witches, they're dirty, they're dangerous, you don't want them. And what's amazing is in this country, that campaign we're still dealing with the remnants of that campaign today. Because if you bring up a midwife to people, they will say, oh my God, you don't want to put a midwife, ew, they're dirty. I don't know, they're not safe, without any understanding of what's happened. And not only that, you eradicate the Black midwife, because now, when you move the industry from an apprenticeship model into this sort of book learning model where you have to go to school, you have to become a nurse, you make a barrier into entry into the industry. So now Black women are no longer even able to be midwives. Although again, things are changing around that, but we have a situation in the United States when it comes to maternal care that really is based on a racist premise that is affecting all of us. And I think it's important that we understand our history. we look at it, we talk about it, and we figure out how we can build from there for all of us.
A few years ago, my daughter and I went to Louisiana and actually visited a slave plantation in Louisiana, and happened to look at one of the slave cabins that all the cabins had been redone into telling us the story of the life on the plantation. And one of them was focused on healthcare, and it had a little sign that said, what are the leading causes of death on the plantation? And one of them was childbirth. So again, this is rooted in history. This is not a new phenomenon for us. Black women, unfortunately, have been disproportionately, and other women of color, disproportionately impacted by this issue. Removing the woman from the center of her decisions around how she chooses, to your point, how she chooses to give birth, how she chooses to proceed through her pregnancy to childbirth is really important. Paula, just the last question for you to that point, how important is it to reframe all of these issues around maternal health, around putting the woman in the center and making her the focus of how we will improve these outcomes over time?
I think that is the key. It has to be patient-centered care, women-centered care. Birth, for the vast majority of people, is not a pathology. It's a healthy process that the body is doing, and we need to center that and respect that. And I think, that's on an individual basis. But in regards to the crisis, I think the only way that we can overcome this and correct this is really centering Black women. The women who are most affected need to come first and need to be heard first. And that's very clear. And the work to correct this course is coming from Black women. As you said, Stacey, it's been happening for decades and decades, and birth justice is a term coined by Black women. And all of that needs to be uplifted and honored for it to then work for everybody. I don't think it can work the other way around. We first have to center Black women to change this entire crisis, especially given what you all just spoke about with the history, because that history is rippling till today, and we have not reconciled with it in a way that we've tried to reconcile with other racist histories. I think maternal health is one that it's there's momentum, but we have not begun to reconcile with the racist nature that's embedded into it.
Well, and I just want to underscore as we close out, there are opportunities to address it. Momnibus is something you all raised earlier. It is a set of policy legislative actions really on the Hill right now. Congress has the ability to act on this right now, and not acting on it means that we are turning our back on the many women of color, Black women, and women overall who are looking for a system that supports them and puts them first, to your point, Paula. So thank you. And Tonya, thank you all both so much. You guys are powerful, amazing women, and we're so grateful for your work and your vision to create Aftershock. I want to say thank you again to both of you, as well as Women in Film and Reframe. I'm so grateful that this film is going to help elevate this conversation around maternal health, maternal mortality and morbidity, helping us all face this extraordinary crisis that a lot of us didn't even know we were facing, and we are. And many women, unfortunately, are facing it, and their families, unfortunately, are bearing the outcome of a crisis that has yet to be fully addressed.